Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, as we've been reporting, asked mayors and premiers to act now to protect public health. The call comes as case numbers continue to rise and break daily records in different parts of the country. Trudeau says the government will support businesses and workers if lockdowns are needed once again. Meanwhile, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is gearing up to make some big asks of the feds in the upcoming fiscal update, whenever exactly that is. For more on all of this, I'm joined by Edmonton Mayor Don Iverson, who is the chair of the Big City Mayors Caucus for the FCM. Hi, Mayor Iverson. Good to see you as always.
Hi, Vashi. Thanks for having me on.
Before we talk about the fiscal update, I do want to talk a little bit about what the Prime Minister said today and the situation in Edmonton. He said, if mayors or premiers feel the pressure of the financial impact on businesses versus taking public health measures, they should act in the name of public health. Are you feeling that pressure?
Certainly, we're hearing more and more pressure from a concerned public about rising case counts, which are moving very, very fast here in not just Edmonton and Calgary, but mid-sized cities in Alberta. It's moving quickly, and the new restrictions that have come in may be helping a little bit, but case counts are still rising, and so there's widespread concern. But I do want to acknowledge that the federal government's interventions, which we've really helped to push for, and in some cases help even design to support vulnerable people and businesses back in the spring, we really appreciate that those are there. And from speaking to business owners here in Edmonton, they really appreciate that those measures are there to support them should the need arise for some short-term closures again. And so as to where those should come from, we could talk about that, but really the strongest tools remain in the hands of public health officials at the government of Alberta to act on a region-wide basis as opposed to municipality by municipality, though certainly it's a concerning situation for all of us, and I personally hope that we're going to see some stronger measures soon.
Yeah, I just want to ask you specifically about that. Have you had a conversation with the Premier? Have you asked him to enact broader restrictions straight across the province?
Well, not straight across the province, to be clear, because the context is different. Certainly back to our face covering and masks debates here, the province was quite clear that they didn't think one-size-fits-all approaches made sense across Alberta in varying urban and rural contexts. But certainly there are health zones that match more or less the census metropolitan area of our greater metropolitan region. And we think that's the right unit, given now that the virus has shown it's borderless. It travels in and out of the city with commuters into bedroom communities. And so acting municipality by municipality may not be the right scale to do this. Province-wide may not be the right scale. That's why those regional measures seem most appropriate. And again, those tools are in the hands of the government of Alberta. So we've suggested to the government that we would appreciate being consulted and engaged, which is happening at the officials level. And I communicated to the Premier today that we stand ready to assist with implementing any stronger measures that may come, including supporting small business and vulnerable people to get through any disruption that might come.
Publicly, the Premier has resisted any sort of quote-unquote lockdown or wider restrictions by force. What did he say to you?
Well, I haven't heard back yet, but it's a continuing conversation. We're also engaging the other mayors in the region here to look at options that we have. Our toolkit's much more limited at the local level. Our state of local emergency tools are really designed for natural disasters, not pandemics. And so we don't have the best tools to take this on, which is why we'll continue to emphasize that the province would be the most comprehensive, consistent, and clear place for measures to come from. With the understanding that business and vulnerable people will be there and supported by the federal government's extraordinary measures should the need arise.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, just because I think our viewers will have just watched a press conference in Toronto in which they said, we're going to keep these restrictions in place for another month, even though the province has dictated that, other regions can roll them back, basically. And so it looks like municipalities themselves are making those decisions. You don't have the ability to do so. Is that what you're saying?
No, in Ontario and in other parts of the country, it varies. There are medical officers of health empowered to make these decisions at the municipal level in Ontario. Here, those decisions are with Alberta Health and Alberta Health Services at the provincial level. So we don't have that expertise, we don't have those powers, and we don't have a mechanism to impose them at the metropolitan scale, except voluntarily among all 13 mayors. But again, our toolkit is much weaker, and we don't have access to all the epidemiological data that the province would to make a targeted intervention that may be required. So again, we call for those actions to come from the order of government having the jurisdiction, the mandate, and the most current data to make the best decisions.
Okay, let me switch gears to what big city mayors are asking for when the fiscal update comes from the federal government. I know we spoke with Mayor Brian Bowman from Winnipeg earlier. He said that you've had conversations with Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland as well as Intergovernmental Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc. What is the big ask?
So there are a number of things active for us. I mean, obviously, making the most of a green and inclusive recovery, which the federal government is planning. We may start to see in the fall economic statement, but we might see the substance of in the spring budget. We're looking to influence that, obviously, around the historic housing investments that the government continues to make and that we think are all the more critical during the pandemic, both for job creation, but also to get vulnerable people off the street during a time of public health emergency. We're also very interested in the government's agenda around a green retrofit, as well as public transit investments, all the things we need to do. And now having a more willing partner, it looks like in the United States, is only going to accelerate that opportunity economically and to do the right thing on climate change. So we're positioning cities as key implementation partners, which we increasingly are around housing and around greenhouse gas reductions. But there's still the fundamental issue that we're facing with Safe Restart. We did get dollars to support us for 2020 for the fiscal impacts of COVID on municipalities large and small. But as we all prepare our budgets for 2021, we're sharpening our pencils, reducing costs wherever we can to minimize our ask of property taxpayers. But there's still a gap to fill. We don't have a number on that just yet, but we're getting close to a tangible ask for operating support for municipalities, particularly the big cities and transit systems, which are overexposed to the challenges of the pandemic. And so we're putting all those numbers together. We'll have more specifics on that. But the discussions with the ministers were very, very encouraging today, that they hear our need and see us as a valued partner in getting things done for Canadians who are our shared top priority, getting folks through this pandemic and getting the recovery right.
I have just a few seconds. I take your point that they hear you and they understand it. Did they provide any assurances that that money would specifically be in the fiscal update?
Well, they pointed to their prior track record with Safe Restart 1.0, with the Rapid Housing Initiative and the Reaching Home dollars, more than $1 billion additional for housing, the throne speech commitment around ending chronic homelessness, and previous collaboration around public transit, zero-emission vehicles, and building retrofits. So there's a lot to build on and channels in place that we can scale to meet our shared ambition for an inclusive and green recovery.
Okay, I'll leave it there, Mayor Iverson. Thanks very much for your time this evening.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.